Hey, welcome back to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with Scott Moon. Chuck Manley had some manly things he had to take care of today. And today, Charles Parlapanides and hopefully his brother here, Vlas, will be on the show. Join us for the second time to talk about their Netflix series and also their writing. Blood of Zeus. It was called Gods and Heroes the first time they were on the show back a couple months ago, and Blood of Zeus is now out on Netflix right now. I binged watched it the week it came out, and it's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you need to go watch it. And I think today will be a fun conversation. Maybe we can dive a little deeper into the story that we did the first time, now that it's been out for a little while. And Charles, welcome back to the show, buddy.
We appreciate you having us on. Really always love talking to you guys, talking about writing. Happy to talk about whether you want to talk about the show and go into spoilers, if you want to talk about the state of the business or anything about our experience. We always say, at least in our experience, writers help other writers. That's not maybe true of some of the other disciplines in our business.
True.
But that's why it's always great just to talk shop. And if there's anything particular, your audience wants to ask or find out about, we're happy to just have an honest and open conversation, Well,
that's a good plug. If you're watching live and you have a question for Scott or I or Charles, pop it in the live chat. Make a little tag question so we know that we can get to it. We can find it in the scroll, because sometimes we lose it.
Sometimes the live chat's a little bit chaotic and robust.
Rowdy today.
Rowdy.
Who gets the keystroke? JF Erickson gets the Keystroke Medium golf clap of appreciation. Welcome for the first comment. Corey Gillum is here. Lauren Moore is here. Dave Chessum's in the chat. What's up?
What's up, Dave?
Patricia Gillum's here, and UDD151 Sci-Fi Booktube. Welcome to the show, and everybody else listening later. If you didn't know, we have a live show on Monday mornings, a live show on Thursday evenings, and also a live show on Tuesdays, but it's kind of funky when Walt does his show. He just likes to do his own thing sometimes.
Whenever he gets done with his 14-hour night shift, to manage to do a video and edit it and put it out there.
That's right.
Barely an inconvenience.
Barely an inconvenience. Last Thursday, we did a Family Feud type show with the people over at 20 Books to 50K.
How did we do?
We lost. We lost a lot. Like, we didn't even lose. It was nowhere close.
It was only like 500 to 250. So, I mean, that's pretty close.
Horrible. But it was fun. And we drank a little bit and had a good time. If you haven't watched that episode, go check it out. It was really fun. Some of the questions, it was interesting to, like, one of the ones was, who's your favorite narrator? And automatically I'm like thinking of the different narrators that maybe it wasn't who's your favorite. It was who would you like to narrate?
Who was your dream narrator for your audio
narrator? And I was like, oh yeah, R.C. Bray would be good. Michael Kramer's great. Like, I'm thinking of like audiobook narrators, and then people, like, all the answers were like famous actors. It was like James Earl Jones, Morgan Freeman, like all the oh, those are really good choices, but not ones I would.
Well, and those questions went out to get the answers to the 20 Books to 50K website, which is like 30, or a Facebook page, like 35,000 people.
Yeah.
So not all of them are like long-term writers. In our kind of little microcosm, we think like writers and book producers, and it's just interesting to see people go out there. I was like, oh yeah, of course that would be good. Maybe we need to think bigger.
Let's see. What have we been up to this week? I've had some big changes in my life the last week. My wife and I decided to start looking to buy a new house. We found a house that we liked, and then literally the next day when we decided, okay, we're going to clean up our house and put it on the market and get pre-approved and all that stuff, water heater blows up. Like, Scott's over here. I blame it on Scott because this is the first time he's come to play poker with us, and
I do break a lot of stuff. I'm just throwing it out there.
Bottom just blew out of the water heater, just blew right out. And so now, right after this show, I'm going to Lowe's with my buddy, and we're going to buy a new water heater, install it, which is not what I wanted to do on my Monday, but whatever.
I'm cutting some questions out of the chat while you do your thing, Josh. So
okay. Let's see what else. Almost done with Tranquility. I have like 8 more chapters left to go through and fix up and edit, and then Tranquility book 1 will be done. I started more drafting on a super secret project I'm working on, which is really fun, and then started on a screenplay that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, but it's fun. And I'm trying to do like a True Detective cop mystery novel type screenplay.
I can read that genre all day long.
It's crazy. Like I've watched all 3 seasons. I've watched the first season twice, and I've got the screenplay of the pilot around here somewhere. And just the not only like the jumping back and forth between the multiple timelines, but just the way that the characters go from the way they were back then to the present, and how it's just a really good show. Like, and I'm like, man, I maybe not the time hop, but that feel, that gritty kind of dark feel to the show, I really enjoyed that. So I'm going to try to do that with this script. I'll probably fail miserably, but it's going to be fun to try.
Never a fail. Always a learning.
Listen, we always say sometimes you slay the dragon and sometimes the dragon slays you, but we always give credit to people for getting in the arena. All you can do is try.
True.
You know, that's all it is.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting process going from drafting novels to writing a screenplay, and I've tried 2 different ways. I think the way that's going to work for me is writing it the scenes out longhand on paper, just to figure out what the scene is about, and then go back in and do the dialogue after.
Or you could take all the dolls off your back shelf and you could set them up.
Ooh, yeah, I could like act it out.
Yeah, I think you should do.
Well, let's see. I've got the Terminator and Arthas and Iron Man, so we can make up characters off
3
of
points of view. You're good to go. You can dress them up.
That's all I had going on. Scott, what about you, man?
Working on, talking about viewpoints, I'm working on 2 books at once. I'm working on my 4th Invasion Day book, Departure Day, and which is in 3rd person, past progressive, I guess, is normal, and a new book for Chaney, a series of Jay and Chaney called Orphan Wars, which I'm very excited about, having a blast with that one. And last week I turned in the final pre-edited draft of One for All to Aethon Press, Aethon Books.
That's the last one in the 3rd one, the First Strike series.
Yeah, it's the last one of that trilogy. And other than that, I'm just enjoying my new, more expansive and clutter-free desk space, because my second iMac died. I put it in the iMac graveyard. It's now I just have a little laptop here. And I kind of like it. You know, I don't feel so crowded and cluttered with all that big, giant, usable screen space. Yeah,
there's got to be some kind of an award for the most Macs killed in a single lifetime.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I just, like I said, I break stuff. I've always broken stuff. When I left the SWAT team, like 5 years after I left, something would break. They still blame it on me. I come over to your house, your water heater breaks. I get a brand new Mac, it breaks. It's just really, I should probably be in permanent isolation for technological reasons.
Yeah, no joke.
Yep.
What about you, Charles? What have you been up to?
Just trying to keep busy, working, spending time with the family. I mentioned to you before, my brother and I are finishing up a last pass on a pilot we're writing for MGM that we love. We think it's a super cool kind of idea, present day mythology, using the mythology of the Nephilim, kind of a fallen angel story.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But framed with kind of like a Men in Black, like there's 2 sides fighting this unseen warfare. And so we think that's really cool. We really love that. And we have a really cool twist at the end, which we think will be just something that would make the show, very different and unique. So doing that, and then, trying to, we completely finished Zelda Breath of the Wild, my daughter and I. That's been something that we put on our quarantine checklist. Like, we got 100% completion, every Kokoroke seed, every side quest. We finished that off completely. Not that that's, but that was just something, something stupid and fun to do.
Finishing any game with all the side quests and like all the different things that you can do at 100% is a monumental achievement, whatever game you're playing, especially Zelda.
You know what? That was just kind of a benchmark game growing up for me, and kind of in some ways, besides reading, that also introduced me to this idea of fantasy. And my daughter's a voracious reader. She loves to read. My wife is the same way. But I also think like supplementing it with some visual stimulus every once in a while, and just like kind of escaping into a world is just kind of fun, especially since, it's gotten a little bit cooler here in Southern California. So we're not going to the beach anymore like we used to.
So what's it there, like 60 degrees?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's
definitely a trial.
So were you a big Ocarina of Time fan or Majora's
I
Mask fan?
loved Ocarina of Time. I loved Ocarina of Time. That was like Nintendo 64. That was like the heyday of gaming for me.
Yes.
That was an amazing game. Just loved all the different worlds you could explore in Ocarina of Time. I loved, we used to play, Mario 64 and Mario Kart and GoldenEye. Like those were just, that was just great. That was like college for me, but that was so much fun.
I remember playing Ocarina of Time for hours, especially like trying to get the horse when you had to ride the horse around the thing to do the race. And I remember just failing time after time after time and trying to do it again. And GoldenEye was like me and my brother and two friends, like just sitting in front of the TV for hours shooting each other. I remember the funnest thing was hiding in the bathroom of the one level where you could shoot out of the air duct.
Vent.
Yes.
Yeah, out of the air duct.
Yes. Such a great game, man. They don't make games like that. I mean, they do. Like Call of Duty is really good. Like Modern Warfare is really good. But that for some reason that type of game where you can sit in front of the TV with all your friends and play, that for some reason that experience is a little bit different, I think.
And it was a little bit different, 4 people could sit in front of the TV together. So I know now everything's kind of moved online, and that's amazing. And like, I play Call of Duty, I play Halo, and being able to, play against 32 live human beings is amazing. But it was something fun, like, we used to go over to our buddy's house and 4 of us would sit in front of a TV. And so it was more of a shared experience,
right?
Which nowadays, it doesn't happen.
Did you ever play Halo where everybody had like their own Xbox and you had like 10 Xboxes linked up?
And you connect them. Yeah. we did that. We did that too. Those were the early days. It's kind of crazy. It seems so kind of analog now, but.
Right. Yeah. And those are the best times, man. And now you can't do it because everybody's locked down. And honestly, it's funny. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. When all of this happened and all the news networks started to go to remote, I thought it was hilarious because we've been doing like this kind of remote interview.
Right. None of them have a set. They have crappy microphones. They get no lights.
Like crap. Like they sound like crap. You can hear the echoes in the background. I'm like, all they had to do was call me. I'll tell them how to do it. Like we've been doing this forever. Let's see if we can catch any early questions in the live chat. I saw a couple pop. Let me see here.
I got 3 of them so far. I got them pasted out. I might have missed some, but
what's the first one you found?
Let's see. You want me to go in order that I got them, or
yeah, sure.
Okay, so it'd be not. It says Lauren asks who is Charles's dream actor for a show of his.
Oh, that's a tough question. What I will tell you, the thing that's amazing is that like we had all these cast ideas initially for Blood of Zeus, but like when we ran them by our casting director, like, oh, they won't even read for an animated show without a pay or play offer. And I get it, and a lot of times that can also not even be the actor that's saying that. It's just the agent saying that on their behalf. They won't even bother to bring them stuff unless there's a money offer attached. But what was interesting is that there is this pool of actors that do voice work that are so talented. I really think some of the people in our cast, watching them work, because also with animation, when you hire someone for an episode, they get a flat fee, and they can do up to 3 voices in that episode. So there's some members, even if you go to IMDb and they're playing this character, but they're also like 2 other characters in the episode that aren't even listed.
Right.
And to see them be able to pivot literally within a matter of minutes of going from someone with like a transatlantic kind of British Lord of the Rings accent to kind of just a different voice, it was just amazing. So I was blown away by how talented these actors were. The one person that everyone would probably say is Daniel Day-Lewis. Not that he would ever do an animated show, and he's retired now anyway. But I just remember seeing like In the Name of the Father, in high school, and just being blown away, and seeing My Left Foot and Last of the Mohicans is one of my all-time favorite films. And
yes.
I mean, not to knock Marvel, but he's the greatest Hawkeye ever. Like I don't care, what Jeremy Renner does. Like Daniel Day-Lewis, as Hawkeye in The Last of the Mohicans is like he's as gangster as they come.
I don't know that he ever had a bad role.
He's super talented. He puts so much into every role, it seems like.
And I'll never forget, I was watching or reading something about In the Name of the Father, and he couldn't understand how Jerry Conlon could confess to something he didn't do. And so basically, and Jerry, he met with him and he spoke to him. He says, listen, like the sleep deprivation and the kind of quote unquote torture that they put me through, it just breaks you. So when they came to film that scene, he had the guards there in the interrogation room keep him up for 2 days. He's like, there's no acting there. I was up for 2 days and I saw what it did to me mentally. And part of me is just like, that's like, that kind of commitment. And he's obviously, he's a Meisner guy, but he's also a method. It's just interesting. And I think that's what, you want when you work with talented people that want to ask questions and dig deep. Now, I don't want to stay up for 2 days straight. Like I need sleep. That would break me.
What is my line again? I can't remember. It's time.
Yeah. So, but he's the all-time greatest, I think. So,
just as kind of a cycle, and you already answered it sort of, you say pay for play offer. For those of us not familiar with the industry, basically they're not going to even give an attention unless they get paid some minimum amount.
Pay for play means they get paid whether or not you even make the movie or the show. It's like they're getting this money. If they say yes, they're getting paid whether the project happens or not. And usually like that was much bigger in the 80s and 90s, and there were big stars that they'd have 20 million pay or play, and there are times they would walk away where a project would even still fall apart and they would still get their paycheck.
Sounds a pretty good deal if you can get it.
Yeah, exactly. There's basically like, I think, Denzel maybe still gets pay or play offers, and very few actors.
And is that because a lot of projects, movies don't, a lot more not all of them make it to the final.
Exactly.
Product,
so many of them fall apart, and basically, the currency that we trade in our business is relationship and status. There's a reason why they say Hollywood is high school with money. And part of it is with these really big actors, they have X slots. And if they're going to commit to a project and start to work towards it, they need to know that that's solid. And if at the very least, if it's not going to happen, they still have to get paid.
Because they can miss other opportunities while they're doing on something. And so, it makes sense, especially if they're a valuable commodity like that, part of the package.
Yeah.
There's a question here. We'll do one before we get into talking about the show, because I think our conversation about that will go for a long time. So I don't want to forget any of these questions. Let's see. Corey Gillum asks, what would you recommend giving up to become a better writer? I don't know.
Interesting.
I've never had that question asked before.
You have to make a choice to commit to this, and there will be sacrifices. Like, we always talk about, like, you shouldn't even attempt to write, I think, a script until you've read at least 100 scripts. And then you have to dedicate time to getting better as a writer, because part of it is initially, at least this is our experience and experience other writers have shared with us, is that initially your skill isn't as good as your taste. And then the only way your skill improves is by continuing to work at it. Your writing muscle, it's just like any muscle. The more you work it out, the stronger it gets. And so part of it is like, this is something we knew we wanted to do. When I was in college, all my friends took jobs in investment banking and had on-campus interviews and got like really high-paying jobs right out of school. And I went back to, working at the fish market I worked at in high school, shucking clams, so that I could intern at a production company in New York. And, I was making just enough to pay my bus ticket and my student loans, and you're just kind of trying to keep your head above water. But at that, production company, I was taking home scripts. I was taking home dailies. I was trying to learn and figure out, because we didn't know anyone, and even how this business worked.
Yeah.
So you do have to be willing to give up, I think, a lot. And you have to be willing to kind of take a 5-year or 10-year window where you're saying, like, I'm going to do some kind of survival job so I can have as much time possible to write. If you can do it with kind of a 9-to-5, great, God bless. But we all worked kind of menial job. Vlas was bartending and working as a golf caddy. I was working as an assistant. Everyone we know, whether it's, James Cameron was a truck driver, Oliver Stone was a cabbie, the Wachowskis worked construction. Like, you just worked some miserable job, and you're just trying to find time, because the truth is, it's not until your 5th or 6th script that you write something that's good enough to sell. In most cases, sometimes you'll see, and just, I don't want people to be discouraged. Sometimes they'll maybe read in the trades that this was the first script they ever wrote. Like when we sold our first script to Universal, our manager at the time was like, "Say it's your first script," and we're like, "No, we're not going to say it." He said, "No, it helps. It makes it seem like you're like a prodigy, that you guys know something." And like we're not going to do that. That's not who we are, and I don't like putting that out. I don't like saying something that's not true. And so I do think you're going to give up a lot if you want to pursue writing, unless you're independently wealthy.
I think
it requires some sacrifice.
That's, there's so much there that's extremely insightful about it, because what that speaks to is a clarity of purpose and a dedication when times aren't good. What's his name? Pressfield talks about the shadow careers and things, the resistance, and how getting a high paying, CEO job feels like it's a responsible, important thing to do, and it is, and maybe you can do both, but it's easy to put all your attention on that rather than reading the scripts and doing all that work in the production company. And some things
it's always
like that.
Interesting because you hear the story, like you mentioned, like Oliver Stone and James Cameron. Like I was watching a documentary on Martin Scorsese the other day, and like listening to what he would do and having his mom in the movie and all that stuff because they couldn't afford anything. I didn't even know that was his mom, and I was like, that's crazy. And then she gives him crap about cutting her part out of the movie, and that's interesting to me because you think of those names and you're like, that guy is a king. Like he done Avatar and Natural Born Killers and all these other movies. But I mean, you're right. They all start out not selling.
Almost everyone we know, it's the same story. I mean, Nancy Miller, who created Saving Grace and created 4 network shows, she was telling us, she's just like, I'm going to bartend. I don't care. I don't care what my other friends are doing, how much money they make. I don't care that I'm not going to do, go on this trip with them or do these other things. I want to write. And part of it is, we always say sometimes there are far more talented writers than us that have never made it, and there are far less talented writers that are way more successful.
True.
But one of the biggest keys, and this was told to us by an older writer, he says, just staying in the business and keep working and keep trying to get better.
Yep.
Because a lot of people will just quit. It's Scott. It's that dedication and commitment that, I think makes as much of a difference as quote unquote talent.
You probably need a pretty good support group, family, and people that'll tolerate it. Because most of us will find that if we stuck into something like that long enough, they'd be like, okay, why don't you go take that expensive college degree and go get yourself a job that pays some money,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pressure there. And I think it takes a special person to be able to endure it. And, and you got to find there's a middle ground, but the people who seem to strike the best, to make the most sacrifices, and for the consistent period of time, not just like once in a while. It's all the time. I
totally agree. The painters are here to paint our house, and the power washer just came on, so I'm going to close the window. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right.
It's crazy because in indie fiction and in screenwriting, it seems like it's all the same. Like the process of making money and doing better and they all start out from the same starting point, and that's interesting. It's good to know, because I know a lot of people get discouraged and I wrote 3 books and they made like $20, and
that's the soul punch in the gut.
Yeah, exactly.
We could go on this a bunch, but I wanted to dig back into something else you said that really fascinated me, where you talked about your tastes. At first, your tastes exceed your talent, because I run into a lot of people and I write so much. I don't read nearly. I still read a lot more than a normal person, but I know a lot of people who they're so much more knowledgeable about, fiction books and movies, and like, have you seen this series yet? And I'm like, no. And it's been like out for 10 years and stuff like that. But so I find that very insightful, that at first your taste will be better than your talent, because that's what draws you into the whole process. I don't know if that's really a question, but I think it's very insightful.
Listen, I think all of us as writers, if you go back and look at something you wrote 5 years or 10 years ago, just like, like, and you see what you're, ouch, it's like, and
who wrote this?
Why did? There'll usually be some gems in there though, where you're like, holy shit, that was good. And then you read another page, like, okay, that needed some work.
Exactly. And it's just that process, Scott. I think you have to have you have to humble yourself. You have to be honest and be able to evaluate your own work, objectively. And the truth is and that's why I always tell people you know, go watch movies, go read a book, because if it's great, it'll hopefully inspire you. If it's not, then I always felt like, well, we can do as good as this, and this got made and this got published, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so but it does take time for your work to grow and get better and to find your footing. And it's not an easy path. And that's why we always tell people, if you think you could live and be happy doing something else, being a teacher, being a lawyer, do that, because this is lots of trials and tribulations. It's lots of ups and downs. But if you have to write, and this is the only thing you want to do, then, go with God and swing for the fences. And just know, though, that it's going to be a grind. But I believe if you are truly committed and you are willing to work hard and stay humble and objective with your own work, I think you can get there, because everyone has a story to tell. As human beings, we all have stories to tell. And that's why I think writers help each other, because it's really not competitive. You have the stories you are meant to tell. We have the stories we're meant to tell.
100.
Unless we're both going for an open writing assignment at a studio, but even then we're each pitching our own version of it. We're each bringing different, elements to it. So, but it does take discipline. It does take sacrifice. And so that you have to make sure this is what you want to do.
That's what Craig says. Craig Martell says in the 20 books group, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. So there's lots of ways we can help each other. If nothing else, just because it's such a solitary profession that sometimes you're like, I would like to talk to another human who knows what I'm even concerned about. I go to work, and a lot of times if I start talking about writing, your eyes just glass over. And that's why I love being here, because this is my community. I can't quote all the football stats and stuff like all of my friends can, but they're not interested in what I have to say. So it's good to have some community.
And Scott, you mentioned Pressfield. Gates of Fire is one of our all-time favorite books. I just love that. So
he's a brilliant man who definitely suffered for a long time to wrestle with his muse, I think.
I didn't know that. Wow.
It was just that's what I take out of some of his books, is that he had a hard road. It wasn't just handed to him on a plate. And there's a whole story where he lived in a concrete block house. That was really probably more of a shed, and he made just enough money to live, and he had an old shitty typewriter, and he took like a year off, and it never came to fruition. Then, then he became a truck driver and all these different things, but he definitely was all in. So.
Well, let's talk about Blood of Zeus for a minute. And it's funny because I just looked over here at the screen I have pulled up, and it still has Gods and Heroes on some of the posters. I'm like, I almost said God of Heroes. It's not it. But that's the original title.
Old school.
So I watched the story, and the story was great. The story was phenomenal. I thought the progression of the characters was fantastic. I think the only negative thing or criticism I would have to say about the show was the sound production. And I don't know if that was just me personally, or if I was like watching it on my phone and not on TV, because the music, it's great, and the orchestra kind of thematic singing in it was awesome, but it just felt like there was it was like constant, and sometimes it was hard to hear the characters.
You sound like our director. Truthfully, the post-production house, they're great, but we ended up mixing all these episodes during the except for the first episode, after the Shelter and Order place came down in California. So we had to do it remotely. We couldn't even attend anymore. We tried to sneak Sean in one day, but they were going around, keeping tabs on businesses. And so that definitely had an impact, but you know what I mean? Like when you consider that, people lost their jobs and people have lost loved ones and
100%
lost their livelihoods, that we couldn't mix it the way we wanted to. There are greater tragedies in 2020.
And honestly, and it doesn't affect the story. Like that was,
Yeah.
I was trying to come up with, a pros and cons list of things that I could like and not like about the show, and I thought the music was the only thing that I didn't like. And
the mix level, the music is brilliant. Whoever composed it did a fantastic
Paul did a
job.
great job. Paul did a great job. Paul Francis Edwards, he crushed it. We were very happy with the music, and again, all of us have had to kind of pivot and find ways to get things done in 2020. But it is interesting you mentioned that, because that bothers Sean, our director. But
it's one of the challenges. That's the thing is every you're always going to say, I could have made it a little bit better here, a little bit better there. There's always room for improvement. Josh, you mentioned that you like the progression and stuff like that. So I don't think we can talk about more.
Obviously, Charles, you can hit this out of the park, but so it follows Heron, which is a demigod, and the thing I don't like about a lot of shows is you either get a lot at the beginning and not really much at the end, or you get nothing at the beginning and then it backfills all the rest of it. And I thought that you guys did a really even job of building each character, and so we were vested in each character, and then taking the time to, this is where it matters in the story to learn about something in their past, and not just front loading all of that and having us remember this was important now. Talk a little bit about that story development process, especially, and honestly, if you're watching a show and you haven't watched Blood of Zeus yet, we might have spoilers here. I want to just talk and don't edit ourselves, but from this point on, if you haven't watched the show and you don't want any spoilers, come back and watch it later.
You can just cover your ears and then yell really loud. Nobody will bother you.
Well, Josh and Scott, you guys, know how this works. And one of the things that we talked about a lot, Christopher Nolan talks about this, is that if you can have 3 or 4 characters involved or intertwined in conflict, but they each have a different point of view, when you create that kind of sphere of interconnectedness and conflict, then the story kind of writes itself, because each character is connected to that conflict, and then they're expressing their point of view on this conflict, and then the story just unfolds. So for us, it was always, we wanted to have conflict on kind of the mortal level and the immortal level. So on the mortal level, it's Heron and Seraphim, who, again, just going full spoiler here, they end up being, brothers, half brothers. And then on the kind of immortal level, on the god level, you have Zeus and Hera, and obviously, Zeus's philandering and cheating, led to these 2 boys kind of being separated, and Hera's obviously, very angry. And as she did in all of mythology, she was always trying to kill these kids and their mothers. And so part of it is, we knew that starting from that story point, we had a great central conflict with 4 characters that are all tied to it, and they all have different points of view regarding it. And then when you we had asked for 10 episodes, but they only agreed to give us 8. But then when you know that, okay, well, this is the playing field, the parameters that we have, you just kind of block out how you reveal information. And that's one thing, we were talking about earlier about, as you do this more, you kind of grow. When we were first starting out, we would figure out cool stories, but then just vomit all the information out, Josh. It was the kind that you hated.
Right.
You would have hated our early scripts. We just and then what we've learned over time is that figure out cool backstories, but then slowly parse it out. Let the audience discover it with you. Reveal the information later. That's, I think, something that, over the years we've learned to do, just gotten better at. But what we said is that the first episode, we're kind of just introducing people to this world and the why now. Okay, why is this story happening now? Well, the demons are here.
Right.
Episode 2, we're introducing, Elektra past his prologue. Elektra's backstory, setting up the idea of these 2 brothers. And we were afraid that we were going to fall flat on our face and that people would automatically kind of deduce that, oh, well, maybe there's going to be a connection between these 2. The 3rd episode is, very much Oedipus Rex. Seraphim kills his biological mother, unknowingly. And then episode 4, we reveal the connection. And so for us, that was how we broke down that first half of the season. And we were hoping it would lay out, because again, if people knew it from Jump Street and could figure it out, then we basically kind of wasted their time and we look like fools spending half the season trying to set up a reveal. But that's why we also felt too that because he was a demon and a monster, we could maybe kind of get away with it, and I think we did.
Oh, I was gonna say the death of their mom, it was impactful in a certain way because it's his mom, it's Heron's mom, and you're like, oh, that sucks. But then when you find out that his mom is also Seraphim's mom, it's like a double gut punch because you're like, oh no. And then when he figures it out, because you figure it out before he does, you see the kind of the anguish and the pain that he's going through, and you're like, God, that that sucks. And that was just so powerful that each three of those the points of view of that death were so well crafted in the narrative, because you made it impactful right when it happened, but you made it doubly so when we learn about the connection between Seraphim and his mom. And that was awesome.
I'm glad you like that. And the other thing too is that we wanted, again, these two characters, Heron and Seraphim, they're brothers, they're two sides of a coin. And what we also wanted to show, because like our other brother, it always drives him crazy. He does something laudable. He's in education. He's a superintendent. But he always hates when like characters, like when the villain doesn't shoot the hero in the head and just finish it.
Yes.
And so we could hear our brother's voice when we were kind of mapping this out. And what we wanted to show in episode 4 is that Seraphim, as a young child, experienced a similar loss. Those two losses are supposed to mirror each other.
Yeah.
And part of it is like, this is, I know kind of Freud and Jung are kind of, been thrown to the scrap pile of postmodernism. But, when we experience trauma at a young age, we often try and recreate that trauma, but put ourselves in a position of power. And so part of it is we thought it'd be kind of interesting, and at least, and again, this doesn't matter. And it was just something that for us just made us feel like, sometimes you worry, like, will this sell? Will people buy this? Is that if he lost his kind of mother figure in a similar fashion, damaged people do damaged things. And that's why he does this to Heron. So even though those don't come in sequential order, if you look at it from a character point of view, because Seraphim saw his kind of mother figure cut down before him and experienced it, he's now recreating that trauma with Heron. And so it's again, sometimes when you write, you're too far in your head and you overthink these things. But that was all part of the thought process and all of that stuff.
Well, and I think too that the order in which you revealed those two instances, where he has the handmaiden that dies, that is his mother figure, if that would have happened chronologically in the show, I don't know that it would have had the same impact as doing it in reverse, just because of the way that it was presented. Because then you have to remember that his mother figure was killed. Yeah. But you're not going to forget that he killed Heron's mom, and then you learn that you're not going to forget that information. And sometimes I think if you do things when you're working on a show like this, where childhood matters in the overall plot, if you front load all that, you lose the connection between the two scenes. And it becomes less emotionally impactful that way.
So when you put all these things together, were you working from an outline? Did it ever drift off the outline? I tend to overwrite my outline, and then I realize that I'm all screwed up.
Scott, it's important to outline. We believe it's important to outline, but then we also believe it's important not to be beholden to it, not to be a prisoner to it. So when we wrote this, we wrote the pilot episode on speculation, which means basically we pitched the idea to an executive at Netflix, John Derderian, who was great, and he said, "I love this idea." He goes, "If you write the first episode in a Bible, a 15-page Bible that kind of explains where the arc of the first season goes," he goes, "Listen, if I like it, I will not only buy it, but I'll promise to make it." And when Vlas and I heard that, like, when you work in our business, so many things just get stuck in development forever. Like we said, if we don't, and we've always loved this, we kind of had this story in our back pocket. We said, if we don't just sit down, it's also 22 pages. It's an anime script. It's not like a feature where you have to write 120.
Right.
We just said, like, we should turn in our WGA cards if we don't jump on this. So we wrote a 15-page, outline about each episode had like a 3.5 page kind of, beat sheet of things that happened. And I would say we stuck to that maybe like 60-70%, but then, when you write and you get in there, you start to move things around, but the general arc of the story remained the same. But we do think it helps to outline, or at least know your broad strokes, your broad kind of beats. And then we like to outline just because it's kind of like a less painful way to kind of test run your idea. Instead of kind of like getting in there and doing all the heavy lifting of actually writing the thing.
Well, because when you're outlining, you're actually pantsing.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just not doing all the work that it takes.
You're taking notes from yourself.
Exactly.
So if you have a major change like that, then do you go back and rework the outline so that it's, or do you did the first outline and now you're just making a run for the finish?
We did the first outline, and then we wrote the first 4 scripts, and then we wanted to make some changes. And so what Netflix asked us was to resubmit the outlines for 5 and 6. We did that. They approved them. We then wrote those episodes, and then we wanted to tweak 7 and 8 and end differently. And so then we wrote like new mini outlines for 7 and 8. They approved those, and then we went and wrote those episodes.
Cool.
So we had an initial huge season-long outline, and then as we kind of went forward, then it got more granular, and we did, per episode outlines, and really got into the specifics. And when you sell like a TV pilot and you have to do an outline, like people need to understand, like that's different. Like when we do feature outlines, sometimes we just write like little beats, like in this scene, and this idea, and this scene, and this scene.
Right.
When you write outlines for like TV, especially network TV, it is everything except the dialogue. Like literally it's like slug line, exposition. You even write in some like, and then Heron says ba 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 ba. It's really, really detailed. I mean, like literally, like I remember the last time we did a network pilot, we wrote, we spent like 4 weeks on the outline, and then once they approved it, we wrote the script in like 6 days, because you're literally just like filling in, the lines. So there's those outlines, and then there's the just kind of like for us on a Word document, like, A, B, C, D happens,
Yeah, these things got to happen at some point, and this is probably the order.
Exactly.
I'm curious about your favorite character of the show. For me, this is a weird favorite character, I think, but mine was the boatman.
John.
That guy creeped me the hell out. Let me just tell you. And then at the end too, I was like, oh man, that's creepy. But then like, it's funny because Zeus, you root for him the whole show, but he's actually a really bad guy. Like just what he's done and how he treated people. And like I didn't realize it until as I'm going through the thing, and I'm like, man, Hera's really bad. And then I started thinking about it, like, but it's kind of Zeus's fault. And that it was interesting to see that you have antagonists obviously and protagonists and all that, but Zeus doing what he did actually makes him the bad guy, but you're super sympathetic to him. So who is your favorite character to come to write? And I know some of them are pulled directly from Greek mythology, but some of them aren't. So I was curious about that process of you from your perspective.
We always would tell Sean, our director, that we don't have heroes and villains. It's all just, protagonists and antagonists and people that, they have something that they want. For us, truthfully, I would say, Vlas would say we don't have a favorite, but for me, Seraphim was always my favorite. And part of it is that we talked a lot about, because Heron, listen, what we wanted to do is very much do kind of a hero's journey, which is kind of frowned upon in this day and age. We live in a very kind of cynical age, and everything is about anti-heroes, and there's a certain darkness. But part of it is like these mythological stories were meant to inspire, and that's almost, again, it's almost like frowned and poo-pooed on today. And so part of it is like what happens now. Yo, Vlas.
Sorry about that.
Howdy.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you, man.
Hey.
He's been sick too. He's been fighting asthma and with the fires.
You guys look good, man. You guys look exactly the same since last time.
We haven't moved since you left. We've been sitting in our chairs
here the whole
time.
You guys look great.
Oh, thank you.
For having me. Sorry for barging in. Sorry for being late.
No, not a worry.
We've been having a good talk about writing process and the show, and we were just talking about our favorite characters from the show.
Thanks, guys.
What I was just going to say, bro, because we talked about this a lot, is that kind of now in modern storytelling, you have to have an anti-hero. And then what that forces you to do is that when you have an anti-hero, so look at Breaking Bad. Walter White is an anti-hero. And so what you have to do, you have to create an even worse guy than him. So we have Gus Fring, who's not just a drug dealer, but he's a drug dealer for the cartel. So he's even worse than our bad guy. And we always reference The Sopranos. Like, all right, Tony Soprano's bad. Season 2, let's bring in Richie Appeal. He's like a really mean gangster. Like, he breaks guys' legs. And so part of it is like we weren't going to go down the anti-hero route. We were going to do the hero with 1,000 faces. We were going to do the Joseph Campbell thing. So part of what that does is that it gives you kind of a more of a traditional hero. And so then your hero and your villain or your antagonist always have to kind of mirror each other. So we knew we were going to create a very sympathetic, or what we felt was a sympathetic antagonist, who we also believed could be menacing and scary. And we think, that's why for me, I always just really like Seraphim, because I think he's a relatable antagonist, and kind of the character that was always, for me, the most fun. It was always fun, Josh, to go into the underworld or into these little nooks and crannies of Greek mythology. It's a great sandbox to play in. But for me, I always enjoyed when we would work on Seraphim.
We're familiar with the underworld because we're from New Jersey, so it's easy for us.
Right.
Well, and the great thing about Seraphim is over the beginning of the show, there is no sympathy for him, and you kind of you acquire that as you watch the episodes and you learn more about him, and that makes his story all that more powerful, in that he could have been just a really nasty dude that was out doing bad things, but then when you find out the reasoning behind everything and kind of the history of him, then you're like, okay, that makes sense. It's still bad, it still sucks, but it makes sense.
We always say you have to be responsible for your choices, as human beings and as the characters we write. And that's also something that's kind of, been thrown to the scrap pile of postmodernism. But in the end, we hope you at least understand where the characters come from. He's still responsible for his choices, but yeah. So that was just a lot of fun to write.
Also, too, we wanted to explore anger, and we explored it in 3 characters. So with Heron, he's able at the end to let go of his anger, and he overcomes the adversity he's pitted against. Seraphim is someone who is consumed by his anger, and he's not able to let it go, and that brings about his downfall. And then for Hera, she has anger too, and it makes her do something, as Charlie always says, like, oh my God, what have I done? She's pushed too far, gone too far, and it forever changes her. So we explored it with those 3 characters, and that was something that was fun to do on a thematic level.
Is there a reason you probably explored lots of things, but was there a reason you wanted to explore anger? Because it seems really kind of topical and maybe something we should all learn from in this day and age.
Thank you. There's too much anger here in the U.S. Yeah. This is like,
I mentioned that because I'm mostly referring to like Baby Yodas and things like that, and the anger that causes people against. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, I am actually serious.
But now they're mad about women armor now from the.
I saw like the chest plate, like for one of the Mandalorian, the female Mandalorian.
Yeah, they didn't like that she had boob armor.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know who it was. I don't ever go on Twitter because it's toxic. But somebody on Twitter watched the show, and I guess she's a feminist critic, and did not like that the female Mandalorian armor
shows her sex.
And really, like I watched it, and I didn't even think it.
I figured it was more comfortable. I don't know.
Like, okay, it's female Mandalorians. Like, oh, it's obvious that it is, but I didn't think, holy crap, look at the boob armor. Like, it wasn't like Val Kilmer's nipple thing in Batman and Robin. Like, you look at it, you're like, oh, it's a really good armor. And then so they'd get mad about the boob armor, but they'd probably also get mad if it was just like a straight asexual type.
You can't make everybody happy.
Know that they were a girl, they get mad too.
So talking about exploring anger. So you guys consciously, that's right. I love your tangents, especially if they involve anything to do with the Mandalorian. But so if did you guys consciously say, well, we need to think about something to explore here, or did that come about naturally, or is it just something that you find compelling from a story standpoint?
I've always thought it was interesting. Always fascinated to see how anger affects different people. And I would also, so it was something that was just, it's always been very interesting. to us, our father had had a bad temper. And, I think that we're all shaped by experience. So it's something that we've always felt is very interesting, something we always wanted to explore. And then what I would also add into that is another piece is this ability to forgive. And it's interesting because we talked to a guy we used to work with quite a bit, and he said on the battlefield, you have love and hate. You have a lot of love for your comrades because you want to try to help them, and then you have hate for the enemy. But they're really close. They're really kind of close to each other, and you can kind of go either way. And I feel that, with love and with anger and even with hate, they're very strong emotions, and they're emotions that make people do all kinds of different things. So as writers, as you guys know, that just makes them very interesting. They're fun things to explore for that reason. And one of the things that we do, we spend a lot of time with our characters with regards to figuring out what exactly they want, because as you guys know, what your characters want, how they go about getting it defines character. So to answer the question, yes, anger was something that has always interested us. We find it fascinating, and it's something that we've always wanted to explore.
And it's Vlas was referencing a writer friend of ours who we've written a couple scripts with. He was a Royal Marine Commando, and he said there's nothing more personal than someone trying to kill you. And I never really thought of that until he said it. But he said, like, there is this extreme love and hate when you're on the battlefield. And as Vlas mentioned, our father, he was a prince, God rest his soul. He was an amazing human being. But boy, when he got angry, he would warn us. He's like, "I'm gonna blow my stack." And when our dad said that, like, out came the belt, and like, man, you ran.
Well, my dad said that, I pretty much submitted to everything or ran away or something like that. Like, that's what we call your last minute warning. I'd usually cool my shit and stop doing what I was doing that brought that on.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
That is something, though, that we've always been interested in, and then it just kind of fit in perfectly with this story.
Well, in lots of stories and just people I've met and stuff, sometimes you talk about that battlefield relationship with the enemy. And a lot of times it's just the hate always stands because it's a survival mechanism, because you can't having to go out and try to harm somebody in order to have internal congruence with your own psyche. You're going to have to say that person's always bad. But I've also seen, at least, especially in story form, where sometimes the adversaries are in the engagement for so long, they understand each other better than maybe the people that sent them there. And so there's kind of like I said, it's very muddy.
Very well said. Very well said. It's very complex, very muddy. And as we know, just as writers, when it's the more complex, the more muddy it is, the more interesting it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's very well said. I think just as in general, Charlie and I talk about this too, when they were training soldiers for World War II, the soldiers couldn't, when they shot, they would shoot just a little bit above the other person. They couldn't get themselves. I think we talked about this on our last show. They couldn't get themselves to kill a fellow human being. I think innately we're not. There's something in us that prevents us, or at least it makes it difficult for us to want to kill someone else, to take life. And now as these young kids play these violent video games, they've done studies on it. It's easier for them. They've maybe been numbed a little
more conditioned.
Yeah, that is something my wife and I are talking about later, is that I'm not as worried about video game violence as some people, because there's like 5 billion people playing Call of Duty, but yet statistically that doesn't translate into actual real world violence. But I do see your point, and I do worry about that. In my work, I've seen people who've committed their first homicide, and the look, and not all of them, some of them are just pieces of crap, but every now and then you get one and they have this look on their face, and you can realize that they stepped into something they thought they understood in the area of like gang violence or something. And now they're looking at what actually happened, and they're just whitewashed with emotions they don't understand. And, the severity has come crashing down, and all those people that were in their crew are suddenly not there for them. And, it's a horrible thing for people to engage in violence without understanding the actual repercussions.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree with that.
One of the things that you mentioned was the kind of complexity, like the emotion of anger, and the different directions it can take a person. What I thought was really good about what you guys did in the back like last 1/3 of the season. I can't remember which episode it was, but they come together, the two brothers come together, and Seraphim offers basically, hey, let's do this together. They've been manipulating us and screwing us around, and let's join together and just take them out of the picture, basically. And like, as a viewer, you're like, that's actually really logical. Like, that's a really good thing. Like, yes, then they probably won't stop manipulating you guys. So if you join together, but then it could be good. But then Heron makes the decision not to, and it's based on his personal tragedy with his mom and all that. But who's to say that wouldn't have been the right decision to make? Because then you have the gods coming against you and the demons coming against you, and now you're getting it from both sides. And I thought that decision to not join with his brother and to hold fast with what he was doing, I thought was really good. And it shows kind of a complex, sometimes you make a decision based on emotion for what you feel are the right reasons, but maybe it didn't turn out to be the best decision you could have made. And that was really cool.
That's very true. Charlie's going to speak to that. Man, you just hit, you don't know, we're like smiling right now. Go ahead, bro.
No, one thing we always talked about, Seraphim, his point of view is that, okay, like, I know this world is real. I know these giants exist. I know gods now exist. I've seen this all. The primordial gods were overthrown by the Titans. The Olympians then overthrew the Titans. Like, there's nothing that says in the history of this world that they live in that this regime has to rule forever. The other regimes have risen and fallen and been usurped. And like, why are we letting these guys run the show? Like, and we have even a little bit more there where he says, like, I'm half giant and you're half God. Like, we can take that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that we've always felt that point of view. And listen, too, regimes rise and fall. We see it all the time through the course of history. And we see it a lot in the ancient world. It was a brutal time. When you really read about some of the historical, empires that rose and fall, and then what happened to those that fell and what they did to them. And so we just thought that should be part of his view of the universe. Like, we don't have to just submit to them. We don't have to, just bend the knee to quote, Game of Thrones.
Right. Bro, sorry.
No, go ahead, bro.
No, can we say, the idea that you had if we got a season 2? That's why I was smiling. Can we talk about that or no? Heron's point of view from that, like, or no?
Netflix asked us not to speak about, potential season 2 storyline. So, we have
to keep that one under wraps. But
what you touched on,
what you just touched on was significant, but we can't talk about it.
Yeah,
we love super secret things.
Yeah,
we episodes.
It's fun because then you can like poke fun at people that don't know. Like, we know something you don't know. No, but what's great about that decision, and hopefully you guys get to do a season 2. I would love for you guys to do a season 2. But what's great about that decision is that if Heron would have accepted Seraphim's deal, Seraphim would have ended up in a very different place at the end, not just place, right? But in a very different place in his life that he did, where he ended up from. And that would have been, it's significant because it could have changed his ending for the better, and worked out actually better for all of them if they would have joined together.
Spot on. Just so spot on. You're killing us.
Yes.
Josh is our resident. Josh is our resident story doctor, story analyst.
But you're spot on. We can't talk about it, but man, very astute. The ripple effect of that is something that really, really interests us, and yeah, it's great. Great point.
I and like I said, if you guys haven't watched it, even though we've talked about it and you've listened to the kind of spoilers, go and watch it. I know most of our audience is writers, so looking at the show from a writer's point of view and looking at it the way they developed the story and the way that they presented it, phenomenal just in the presentation of the story and the material.
Thank you. Well, listen, for the writers out there too, I mean, this should be something that encourages them, that motivates them. We didn't know anyone when we started, so if two guys like us can make it, well, then then anyone can make it.
Anybody can.
Trust me.
What about the
Ed's
cool
gotta
thing,
stay in the
every
game.
episode you see executive producers like on the thing. What was cool about watching it is every time, for me at least, every time your guys' name showed up, I'm like, hey, I've talked to those guys. I know those guys. That's really cool.
What was nice is that for once, what we wrote is what ended up on screen, which, not for better or for worse. It's just nice. That's the difference. In features, it's a very director-driven business. It's the director is king. You do what they ask, or else they fire you. And then we were rewritten on, the features we've worked on. So for better or for worse, it was just nice that we got to tell the story we wanted to tell. But the other thing I would tell writers is that we live in this kind of age of peak IP content, and everyone wants IP and branded content. And what I would say is that with Blood of Zeus, just look at public domain, look at things that have awareness, that you can then take and put your own spin on. Because, some of the movies we grew up loving and, they don't get made nowadays. But that doesn't mean you still can't write and find something that you're really passionate about. Just try and seed it in a world that has some awareness. And so whether it's going into the Brothers Grimm or Greek mythology or whatever it is, I think it just helps your odds, because so many people now, on the buyer side, they need big ideas. They need things with awareness. And obviously none of us own the rights to comic book catalogs or, video game catalogs.
Yeah.
But the public domain is the public domain. It's open to all of us. And that's where we get to use our writer brains.
And just to echo that again, and I'm echoing what I said before, but it can happen, guys. It can happen. You can have like a big idea. I still remember Charlie sitting at that desk in our old apartment in LA. I'm like, what are you working on there? What is that? And like in writing this idea, and it was like the power of an idea and how that can lead to a story that can then lead to an anime that can lead to a movie, whatever. It can happen, and it can happen again with just ordinary guys. We're ordinary guys. We grew up in a working class family. We grew up actually very poor, and our parents worked very, very hard, and we did better as we grew up. And what's good about that, again, like that experience of being at times also ostracized because we were children of immigrants. We were the guys that brought the spanakopita into, we share this with every interview, into the lunchroom, and people were like, oh, that stinks. What is that? You guys are weird. And so, but that shapes you. And so we did feel like outsiders at time. And I think everyone in their life at some point feels like a bit of an outsider. So what do we do? Oh, so that's part of Heron. He's the quintessential outsider, the bastard, the person. Yeah. So it was a very personal story for us. And as you guys know, all good stories are very personal, and it's also what helps them when they're personal too. You're passionate about them, and passion is contagious. But again, like it can happen. It starts with an idea, and just believe in those ideas, believe in your dreams, and if you're excited about it, then there's a very strong possibility that other people will be excited about it.
100%. I think that's well said. Thank you.
It is.
Well, we're actually, unfortunately, at the end of the hour, and so we're going to have to cut it short. But thank you guys for coming on the show and hanging out with us again. Anytime you guys want to come back, there's an open invitation for you guys to come and hang out, because
we love you guys, man. You guys do a great job. So sorry I'm late. I really apologize.
Life happens. It's all right, man.
This is nice to talk shop. Scott said this earlier. I think it is. I do think it's important that, writers talk, they share ideas, because it is a very solitary profession. It is a very solitary kind of existence. And so it is important to come together and talk, and you help each other, and you lift everyone up. And so we always love talking.
It's not competitive with writers. We're all in this together, guys. And people, if you're a writer and you feel it's you shouldn't feel that way. It's not that way. It isn't.
Lauren, Patricia, and Barta today, they're all expressing their thanks for the encouragement, and we also appreciate it as well. And we're glad to count you as part of our community, and it means a lot to us that you came on the show.
100%.
We love coming on the show, and I'm glad if we said something that makes someone feel a little bit better. Great, and it's the truth, guys.
And Josh, good luck with the hot water heater, because that's the kind of stuff that makes my head explode.
Yeah.
Because I'll be like looking forward all weekend to like sitting down and writing something that I've been thinking about.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, the dishwasher's not working. Can you fix this? I'm like, oh, I wanted to get to the computer.
Oh, we were thinking of all the things we're going to have to do to fix the house up to get it ready to sell. And I'm ticking off this checklist of this. And then the hot water heater explodes. And I'm like, that was not on the checklist. That was not it. Like, but that's
got to rewrite the whole house selling outline now.
That's right. Everybody that came out and hung out with us today, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with us during the live show. If you're listening on the live or the audio stream, rather, come and hang out with us. The live chat's where it's happening.
It's the right thing to do.
If you're going to listen to the show or watch the show, you need to do it live for sure. Tomorrow will be Coffee and Concepts with Walt Rabillard. And then Thursday night, Kayleen and Lauren do the writer's journey. Don't miss that. And come back, hang out with us next week. We're going to talk about some writing, probably some reading, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great Monday.
Take care, guys. Thanks again.